Hello, and welcome back to the Long Distance Love Bombs podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, and today's guest is Demir Bentley. Demir is a productivity expert. He's the co-founder of something called the Lifehack Method. He has worked with more than 50,000 professionals, including some C-suite executives at Google and Uber and Facebook. He's been highlighted in Forbes magazine, Bloomberg, Entrepreneur. His mastery lies in the domain of time management, optimization, and self-mastery. But one reason that I really am drawn to and resonate with Demir's work is because he centers the idea of optimal lifestyle is the biggest goal. So all of the productivity, all of the organization, the agency, the integrity, the responsibility is centered around the idea of maximizing our time so that we can have more time to do the stuff that we love, to create a lifestyle that we adore. And in this conversation, we talk about his journey going from a Wall Street executive working 80 hours a week who nearly died, to his transformation. And we talk about the idea of navigation, of navigating as a verb to sort our way through life, to adjust our sails, to adapt to the environment around us. I love that conversation. We talk also about what he calls the conqueror's curse, which is to say that as you grow up, as you become an adult, you get a career or kids or possessions, and you're doing well and you're conquering and you're kicking butt, but also at the same time, there are logistics to worry about. And the things that we own us in some regard. So he talks about how to deal with that. And then also we dive into what he calls the four freedoms related to financial freedom, time freedom, spiritual freedom, and how all of us can create more freedom for ourselves to then explore our purpose, to enjoy our lives, to move from doing and doing and doing to simply being and savoring and being present. So I really enjoyed this conversation. There's a lot there. He's very aligned with my vibe, with my idea, my attitudes. If you are a fan of what I'm doing, I think you are going to love this conversation and what Demir talks about. He's open and honest and vulnerable and fun. And dude also knows his stuff. He is brilliant. And I learned some things with this one, and I am sure that you will too. So enjoy this conversation with Demir Bentley. Demir Bentley, welcome to the podcast, brother. Good to finally push the record button. We just had a grand old time.
A nice 20 minutes of
praying to the internet gods and trying to work out audio tech.
But I think in the end it was a Fonzie move that really got it. You just got to hit the computer really hard to get it going.
Yeah, and I perhaps not so graciously just completely cut you off and was like, "No, man, we just need to start recording. This is super good. Audience is going to love it." And so I appreciate your willingness to surrender to that moment, I suppose.
No, man, I felt it too. So I'm really excited about this conversation.
Awesome. And so, Demir, before we dive into all the various things we're going to discuss, I always like to ask the guest a very simple question, which is simply like, who are you? So for those listening that have no idea who you are, what you do, why you're here, what's your deal? Who are you?
Yeah. My wife, Carey, and I run a company called the Lifehack Method. And I'll tell you a little bit about my story in a second. But, essentially why we exist in the world right now is just to help people get their life back, get more organized, get more productive. I hate that word productive, but what I mean by productive is simply, get back on offense in your life. And we believe that everybody can live happier than a billionaire. And what I mean by happier than a billionaire is simply that I actually know a bunch of billionaires, really, like you 1 or 2 degrees separated, and they are all really miserable, really unhappy people. And it's not actually that hard to live happier than a billionaire. I think what it requires of us, though, is to just take a little bit more ownership of the circumstances of our life. So when I think productivity a lot, and what inspires me about the space and why I devoted my life to it is I'm just really excited about people taking just a little bit more ownership and agency inside the logistics of their life so that the logistics of their life doesn't gobble up all their happiness.
Yes. I feel like my entire audience will be nodding at that final bit. The logistics of life gobbling up your happiness, right? Because I've referred to it as adulting. Like, adulting, man, I got to work and pay bills and shop and have a relationship and do all the things. And that, I think, is at times juxtaposed with this inner voice inside that wants to just run and play and laugh and be.
Yeah. This is what I call the conqueror's curse. Conqueror's curse is that the more territory you acquire as you go about life, and when I say territory, what I mean in this analogy is you get married, you get a house, maybe you get a second house. Now you got stocks, now you got a job, now you got volunteer commitments and a couple kids. This is great. This is great territory to conquer, right? In life. These are the good things in life. The problem is that the more territory you conquer, the more territory you have to defend. And life has a way of coming at you from all sides at once. And this is why I call it the conqueror's curse, is that sometimes the sense of chaos, the sense of overwhelm, the sense that life is coming at you from all sides is precisely because you've done really well. You've done great for yourself. You've gone and created a business. You've gone and gotten married to somebody. You've gone and had some kids. Fantastic. Well, now you need to level up your game in order to defend that territory.
I love that analogy. I've not heard it described as it's almost gamifies life. Of like, right on, you own dishes. Guess what? You need to wash them if you use them, right?
Yeah.
Like amazing.
And then if you have a dishwasher, you got to maintenance that.
Yeah, right. Like we just my partner's parents were in town this last weekend and they bought us a vacuum cleaner. And I was like, wow, a vacuum cleaner. Like we didn't even own a vacuum cleaner. I felt like such an adult. And then they left and it was like, oh, where do we store the vacuum cleaner? Well, like, how do we charge it? Et cetera, et cetera. I was like, oh yeah. Reminds me of that quote that I love. The invention of the ship is also the invention of the shipwreck. You heard that one? Sounds similar.
I haven't, but I love it. Makes so much sense.
So the logistics gobbling up our lives, but you also alluded to your story before we started recording around working 80 hours, had what my mom calls come to Jesus moment.
Yeah, well, gosh, man, visit the devil moment. I guess an important part of understanding what motivates me is, I was that hustle culture guy. I really learned at a young age that I needed to perform for love, that I needed to achieve things, and that made me that really driven young guy working in Wall Street in New York, kicking in those 80-hour weeks. And the funny thing is, I didn't see anything wrong with it. I saw nothing wrong with it. Unlike your audience, who has pretty enlightened folks, for me, I was like, I had the busy badge. Now I am so busy. It makes me a good human being. And I would brag that I worked nights and weekends. And then what happened is I actually almost worked myself to death. I was literally giving a presentation at work. My eyes one of my friends was there, said my eyes just rolled back in my head. I literally just melted in my chair, fell down onto the floor, rushed to the hospital, the whole thing. And they diagnosed me with something called early salaryman sudden death syndrome. It is basically a fancy way of saying you are probably going to work yourself to death if you don't stop working this much. And so I would love to say that I got enlightened, that I got religion, that I went to a personal development, that I realized that I shouldn't be working like this. No, I'd probably still be working like that right now if my body hadn't just told me, no, we have to stop. And my doctors thankfully put me on a completely new path in my life. And I'll pause and just say, yes, my experience was pretty extreme and pretty unique. But I think COVID has pushed us all to the brink. And certainly if COVID didn't push you to the brink, then the last 2 weeks of the Ukraine crisis definitely pushed you to that brink. And I feel like we're all ready, almost as a society, I can feel it, to just reevaluate our relationship to work, to the logistics of our life, and maybe just say, I think I might need to reorganize the way that I approach this thing called running my life.
Yes. And one thing that jumped out at me there in what you just said, well, all of it jumped out, but you referenced wearing the busy badge, or that you're working 16 hours a day and you were proud of that. It was almost like part of your identity, this egoic badass. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Hey, man, I feel like everybody has visited that town once, even if you haven't lived there, where you've gotten over enrolled in work. Your whole identity becomes your work. And that was me. And the weird, what's weird about it in retrospect is, I was so sure that it was going to pay off for me. Like there was no doubt in my mind. I think of it very much like almost a religious faith that I had in hustle culture. Because if you looked at the circumstances of my life in that 10 years that I was working 80 hours a week, they were not great. I got massively overweight. I had 2 failed engagements. I wasn't able to sustain relationships with my friends. I definitely was drinking to excess and not treating my body and my spirit right. I mean, my life was really sort of a mess. But it's weird because I remember in that entire time having perfect faith that it would all work out for me. Because I'd really bought into the story that it's like defer gratification now, work like a maniac, your values your work, and it will pay off in the future with interest. And I think that's why when I landed on my back around the time that I got my 3rd surgery for this mystery illness where I was almost going to die, it wasn't just that I went bankrupt on that concept. It was that I felt like I'd almost lost faith. It almost felt like this. I hope nobody here has experienced this, but when I was young, I sort of fell out of my faith, having been raised in the Christian church. And there's a feeling of stupidity, like, God, I'm so stupid. How could I have ever believed that? Just a feeling of almost being taken for a ride or almost betrayed. And I felt all of those feelings as I fell out of hustle culture. And I do think of it now, looking backwards, a bit like a religion in the sense that you give your all to it with this blind faith that you're going to get this payoff at the end. And when I didn't get the payoff, I got something completely different behind door number 3, something terrible and hideous. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I really didn't know what to do with myself. Everything in my life was fashioned around being a badass on Wall Street, going on TV, with the tie all the way up to my, neck. So it's choking me. I mean, I loved it. I fed off of it. It was everything to me. So when I lost that, I was completely lost.
Yeah, I interviewed a woman named Tiffany Berkowitz on the podcast, and she talked about being raised in a very evangelical, fundamentalist religion. And she was like the shining star. She went out, traveled the world to convert people. And one of the things that struck me was she talked about this idea that once her faith was removed, that was essentially the foundation of her entire life. And it was this like, I don't know who I am, but also I don't understand how the world works. Like, I don't know I don't know what I believe anymore. Did you have any of that once your faith was taken? It's like, who am I? What do I do?
You just hit it right on the head. In fact, I'm so glad that I was with a great partner at that time. And I had actually just taken my first personal development workshop shortly before this happened. And it was just enough to maybe open my eyes to the idea that there could be other alternative ways of thinking and arranging my life. I wasn't bought into it yet. I didn't believe, but it was just enough to give me a little bit of a ray of hope. And so I was with who is now my wife right now. And we sat down and we came up with a new framework for organizing our life. And we call it Lifestyle First. And Lifestyle First was just a simple framework that we were never going to delay gratification ever again. We were never going to say, I'm going to hate my life for the next X period, whether that's 1 week or 1 year or 1 decade, in order to get a payoff later. We were going to arrange our life to get as much of the lifestyle we really thought we needed to be living today, and then find employment and finances that fit around that. And since then, we sort of refined that and focused on something that we call the 4 freedoms. And so this is almost like, again, maybe not religion, but certainly the philosophy that I live my life by now. And so the 4 freedoms are really simple. It's time freedom.
Hang on. Sorry.
Oh, sure.
Sorry, Demir.
Yeah, go for it.
Before we jump into that, I'm curious, like when you both sat down to have that conversation where you're like, okay, we're going to put our lifestyle in the middle as the priority. Like, what did that process or conversation look like? Was it as simple as just a chat over dinner, or was it activities or journaling? Or
I think I was weirdly, I was the harder one to convince, even though I was the one that was having the physical manifestations that were so clear that this life was over for me. I feel like everybody knew that it was over. I think my boss knew right away that I was not coming back. And I was like, no, just give me a couple of weeks to heal up and I'm coming back. And I think my wife knew and my family knew. My family in particular never understood why I went that direction with my life. And we're sort of always hoping that something would have pulled me off of that track. And my wife has ulcerative colitis and also had her own difficulties and journey with trying to work too hard and climb the corporate ladder. So it felt like my entire world was trying to tell me, dude, you're not going this direction anymore. But I was still trying to put that square peg in that round hole. So I think once I knew, well, let me give you more honest. I don't think I understood how to be loved if I wasn't successful. I really don't think that I had a conception that I could be worthy of being loved by my awesome wife, who was then my girlfriend, if I wasn't this badass who had this incredible career, who was going on TV. It just, I didn't know why anybody would be with me aside from what I was able to accomplish in life. And so I think once my wife was able to make me realize that she would love me no matter what, and it's sort of a funny story. She actually proposed that we just build a tiny house and live on my parents' property in Northern California and do that for 5 years while we figured out what we were going to do next. And I think when she proposed that, it was almost better than saying, I'll love you forever, because I think inside of that image was the idea of like, wow, if this woman's willing to have me walk away from $250,000 a year and a badass lifestyle in New York, which really wasn't that badass, but what I imagined at the time was badass, and live with me at my parents' house in a tiny house out back, I was like, this must really be love, and that really freed me up to think about almost like a complete tabula rasa. Like, what would life look like if I wasn't chasing the brass ring or reaching for the brass ring? What would it look like if I wasn't overworking? And so we started to actually have a lot of fun with that. And actually, one of the cool, funny things we say to each other now that came out of that time was this idea of make your plan D better than your plan A. Meaning like, plan A is great, plan B is great, but plan D was, we're going to move to this beautiful property in Northern California and have a little micro farm and be freakins or something like that. And it actually, we had so much fun visualizing what that lifestyle would look and feel like. And it never happened, by the way. If anybody's ever wondering if we ended up moving in with our parents, we never did. Life didn't take us that direction. And yet just having that in our back pocket to say, hey, she's down with it. I'm down with it. It feels like something is more resonant for us. That was the shift moment where my wife was able to make me feel safe enough to start visioning a lifestyle that was organized a little bit different than what we had in New York.
Yeah. Love that, man. It sounds like something I've spoken to previously, which is years ago, I confronted the worst case scenario, which was like, okay, it's that. And if I can really face that and love myself through that, or even receive love through that, then you're almost unstoppable. It sounds like you're going to live with me in my parents' backyard in a hut. Like, okay. And I believe you. Like, okay. It just creates this relief or this release to do anything.
And I could see she was almost more excited about that than going forward. Like I really got a sense from her that I finally saw that she was done, that she was played out and ready for a change. And I think maybe she always had been, and it was just my projecting onto her the idea that she only loved me because I was working in New York. Once I was able to realize that had nothing to do with it, then I was able to open myself up for a change. And so, not to push this forward, but we really had this amazing weekend where it was almost like the treaty at Versailles. All of the stakeholders came together and we really redesigned our life at the table around these 4 core principles that were all about freedom, but different dynamics of freedom. And I think from that moment forth, now we might be lucky, but from that moment forward, it just felt like downhill. Like once we almost found the right principles that could guide us to the next phase of our life, it almost didn't matter where we landed or what city we were in or what jobs we were working from there on out. It just felt like everything started flowing again. Or maybe a better analogy is instead of swimming up the river, it was the moment where we decided to start swimming with the current a little bit, if that makes more sense.
Yeah, or just let the river carry you and just surrender to what you actually want and what you're actually supposed to be doing in this life, rather than striving to fulfill this story that was literally killing you.
I mean, that's exactly what it was. I mean, the story was driving my actions. My actions were killing me. And that's exactly what it was.
Okay. So the 4 freedoms, you called them?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I realized was that when we went to create the life that we wanted to create, we didn't have the freedom to create it. Meaning there were things that we wanted to do that we either didn't have the time or the money or the career optionality or we just didn't have the power to start designing the life that we wanted. So we started, instead of thinking about, hey, where do we want to be? We started thinking about these pillars. Like, okay, the more, and I'll sort of go slowly through it. Time freedom is pretty simple, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of things we want to do in our life. And if you don't have time to do them, there's no, do not pass go, do not collect $200. I mean, you're really stuck. And so we saw very clearly that we wanted to get our time back and not be, I think working for other people can be a beautiful thing and a very respectable way to make a living. But the way that I was doing it felt very much like I was owned by somebody else. Every single bit of my time was owned by my employer and my industry. And so I very much wanted to feel what it felt like in life when I had my time back. Or I was selling a little bit of it, but keeping the best of it for myself. So that's time freedom. It's just this time freedom is pretty simple. It's just the idea that you have the time to do the good stuff, like working out, take a nap. I can't tell you how many of my clients say, health is my top priority. And I say, great, okay, let's make that. And then they'll say, well, I don't have the time. So it's okay. It's one thing to have priorities, but you've got to have time to back up those priorities. And
just to highlight something you said there that I think is really valuable and profound. You said something about selling your time to your job, which I think is a really cool perspective to have about a paycheck. It's like, yeah, you're doing work in exchange for money, but also you're literally giving them your most valuable possession for a dollar sign.
Yeah.
And that I think is a game changer when you see it like that.
I mean, people also take it the opposite way, I think, too far and say, oh, we should get all our time back. As somebody who has literally gone to working 2 hours a week, that's really miserable. My experience with my clients, and I'm not projecting this on anybody else, is that the perfect day for most people would include 3 hours of really stimulating work. And so I don't think about the ideal state as being not working at all. But I think we've all got 3 or 4 good hours a day to do some really badass work. And I think if we could get ourselves to a place, and I think most people can do their job in 3 to 4 hours, really. There might be a lot of shallow work surrounding their job that's gobbling up a lot of their time. But when it comes to the truly valuable things they do for their employer that moves the ball forward, or their own business, maybe if they're self-employed, I think of that as being 3 to 4 hours a day. And I think if people can get it down to 3 to 4 hours a day, I just see people blossom. Where when they try to go below that, they say, no, actually, I really like the feeling of 3 or 4 hours of really good, purposeful work. And so my thing, that's sort of what I put out into the world is I want to see all my clients get down to a level of work where they feel like they've been part of a team, like they've moved a mission forward, like they've done something good with their time, but they still have enough life force left afterwards to go to the gym, hang out with their kids, play some ball, whatever it might be, volunteer. All too often when we take it up to 8 hours, we end up being so burnt out that even if we have time in the evening, we're such a squeezed out grape that all we can bear to do is really just go collapse on the couch. Or worse yet, and this is something I've really felt bad about whenever it's happened to me, thankfully it's rare, is those moments when you want to be with your kids and you're faking it. Where you're like, I know I need to be a dad here and I'm going to show up and I'm going to be a dad, but really I'm counting the minutes until she goes to bed because I'm just a squeezed out grape right now. And that's the worst feeling in the world. And so time freedom is really about not just having the time, but having enough energy left over that you can capitalize on the free time that you have.
I love that. For your client, that said, I don't have any time for my health, even though it's my highest priority. What was your response, or how did you guys work through that?
Yeah, I mean, productivity is so often a tangled up ball of yarn. It really is. We want to think that productivity or dealing with the logistics of life is some silver bullet, like we're doing one thing wrong. And the truth is, it is just 1,000 things done really chaotically and wrong that ends up tangled up in a huge knotted mess. And the process is often much more boring, but much more fulfilling. Is just, you just start anywhere on the ball. It really doesn't matter. Let's just start unknotting the ball. And then once we start that process of unknotting it, you never sort of know how fast it can go. Sometimes it goes very slow in the beginning and it can be very frustrating, but then you unknot that massive knot and the whole thing starts to unravel and loosen up. And it results in a lot of energy coming back to you, a lot of time coming back to you. And importantly, and this is what people don't think about, just agency. This idea of you being in charge of your game rather than the game being in charge of you. And it's really hard to quantify that, but I can tell you, you see it in people's eyes when you work with them. This moment where they say, okay, I'm back. I'm on the steering wheel. I've got my hands on the driver's, on the steering wheel. I'm in charge again. I'm setting the tone and pace of my life. And that's something beautiful that productivity work can do. And, I think people think that I'm here to sell them on the newest hot productivity app or technique or whatever. I couldn't give a flying fig about productivity, but what's beautiful about it, if you really want to accept it and value it for what it really can do, what productivity can really do is unknot that ball of yarn that is the chaos of your life, get you back on offense, get you feeling like you're dictating the terms of your life, and as an output coming out the tailpipe, giving you a bunch of your time back, giving you a bunch of your freedom back, giving sometimes even things like health and money. Because when we step into ownership of the logistics of our life, there really isn't much that we can't do to improve our circumstances.
Amen. Yeah.
You can tell I'm pretty religious about this, but it's true.
No, and hallelujah. Exactly that. I've felt the same where you work with somebody, or even in my own life, I have these little aha moments or epiphanies of oh, hang on, I can change this, or I can respond to this in a different manner. Even if I can't change this, I can change myself and how I am dealing with this thing and sort of reclaim that agency that you speak of there. What's the second freedom?
So I like to think about these freedoms as almost feeding into each other, right? So once I got some time back for myself, we started working on some side hustles to create some financial freedom. We didn't just try to make more money. We also embarked on a minimalism journey to really reduce what we thought we needed, reduce our expenses, but not just expenses, but just what we thought we needed to be happy. And that really gave us a lot of financial wiggle room, a little financial freedom. Most people cannot cover a 3-month unemployment period, meaning if both of the people who work in their family are unemployed for more than 3 months, most people in the United States cannot cover that. And think about the pressure that puts on your ability to make decisions for your career and say, I want a better job, or I want a job that would give me better hours. And so what's cool about time freedom is with time, you can start focusing on financial freedom. And financial freedom was something that we did by making more money and reducing what we thought we needed to be happy. And we took that 3 months for us and turned it into 18 months. So we created, specifically, one of the first things we did was create an 18-month gap where we said we could both be fully unemployed for 18 months and be fine and have the time to look for something better that suits us. What's funny is we didn't quit our job when we got that 18 months, but our attitude changed at work a lot. And we were much more emboldened to say no to projects that didn't serve us, and say no to people trying to dump work on top of us, say no to relationships and dynamics that were unhealthy for us. And everybody thinks that the second that you say no, everybody's going to come out with pitchforks and tar and light you on fire and run you out of town. And the truth is that nothing happens. People say, oh, wow, that person's standing up for their boundaries. That person's saying no. They usually need you, usually not always, but they usually need you a lot more than you need them. But our perception is the opposite. And it's true, because we can't sustain that if we don't have the boldness, we don't have the financial freedom to sustain and back us up when we say, no, listen, I'd rather leave than you treat me this way. I'd rather leave than work on projects that I don't care about or go against my ethics, right? That's what's beautiful about financial freedom, is that often you don't need to flex it. It's like it's the walk softly, carry a big stick. You can just have it there and it can feel so powerful, but you need to pull it out and whack people so much less than you think you would. But they know it's there and they feel it from you. So if the first one was time freedom, the second one was financial freedom. And if just quickly, I'll just give you the third one because it flows naturally from the first and second, which is career freedom. The second that you've got time and you've got your finances in order, you've got some space and freedom around these two factors, immediately you're now more emboldened to claim more career freedom, either inside your current job, but often I see people starting new endeavors, side businesses, dream businesses, or going for a job that maybe they don't think they can get, but heck, let's try for it, right? And so that's what's amazing is time freedom leads to financial freedom can lead to career freedom. And then all three of those lead to the final one, which is spiritual freedom. Because when, I didn't define career freedom well, but it's really simple. Career freedom is when you get the freedom to choose the work that's really meaningful and connected to you, so that you don't just work for a paycheck. You're working towards a mission and with a team that you really care about. And I think that's such a beautiful thing and such an important aspect of a really fulfilled human existence, is this idea that you're not trapped in the job that you have options, that you can have agency, that you can move out there and reach for a different job or create a different job. And of course, when you've got all three, then you've got the time and the space to really create space for what really matters, which is your relationships. Because funny enough, like nobody's on their deathbed saying, thank God I made partner of my law firm. Said no one ever. On important moments, but we don't talk about our career. We talk about other things, but it's so easy to lose sight of that when we've lost all of our freedoms, when we have no time freedom, no financial freedom, no career freedom. Then it can really feel like your whole world shrinks down to what's happening at work, because it feels like a guillotine hanging over your neck at all moments.
Yeah, I pictured someone on their deathbed of like, I wish my 7-figure business was 8 figures. It's like they're dying.
I never broke 8 figures.
I never broke 8 figures. I really align and appreciate all of that. And I feel called to play devil's advocate for a moment. And I'm sure you've heard this many times from many clients, which is, Demir, that sounds great, but you don't understand. I have a kid and I have bills and a mortgage, and it can't be that easy, and blah, 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 blah. So to that kind of response, how do you begin to interrogate or work through that? Because I think it's based upon stories and belief systems that we might not even recognize that we have. So what's your process to unpack that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if anybody really wanted to be careful and go back and rewind and listen, you'll notice I never said it was easy. In fact, it really can be hard, not necessarily financially hard, but often reclaiming ownership and claiming our own freedom life is almost never easy. But it's worth it. But it's absolutely worth it, because I can tell you, being on the island, if you were on the mainland and I'm on the island, I'm definitely over here saying, hey, it's going to be a swim. It's going to be tough, but it's amazing over here. It's amazing. If you can make it to the island of time freedom, career freedom, financial freedom, spiritual freedom, what's so amazing about it is you realize you don't have to be a billionaire to be happy. You can actually be happier than a billionaire with so much less. And I also think about the moves that people have. I think about Tiffany, one of my clients who came to me. She was so up against the wall. Just check out her situation for a second. She was going through a really contentious divorce with an abusive husband who was going for the marbles. No settlement. He wanted the kids, was going for full everything. And the center point of his, argument towards the court was that she was about to lose her job. And the truth is she was about to lose her job. She had been through so much personally with this abusive relationship and trying to play single mom and maintain her career that she really was on final warning at her job. And so she came to me with this sort of like plea, this desperate plea of like, if I lose this job, I lose my kids to this abusive man. I mean, it really was all the marbles. And so we started in a very humble way. We started by planning her weeks. And I think her reaction rightly was like, Demir, no, you don't understand the stakes. You don't understand how big this is. You need to bring out the bazooka. I can't be playing with a knife here. Like bring it all out. And I said, this is the bazooka, right? This is how we start untying this ball of yarn. So what I had her do is go to her boss, and I had her make an agreement with her boss. She said, if you were planning on firing me in the next 2 months, I'm just asking you to let me complete this productivity course that I'm taking. That's it. Just let me finish this before you fire me so that I can show you what I'm about, because I've invested my own money and trying to turn this around. And her boss was like, okay, you've got till this course is done to get an evaluation. And not only did she not get fired, she got promoted 6 months after that. Within the next 18 months, she got promoted 2 more times. So she got promoted 3 times within 18 months. And that to me shows the power of when you really decide to take back control of how your life operates, the logistics of your life. You and I talked a little bit before we started recording about how important personal development, spiritual development is. And I agree 100%. But I think a component that we miss is where it connects to your Monday mornings. Right? We can read the books and the books are amazing. And we can go to the workshops and the workshops are life-changing. But we're still going to have to go back into our Monday mornings and open our laptops and maintain and get things done and move the ball forward. We're still going to have to make dinners for our kids. So I think that's the element of personal development that I live in. Not to negate the rest of it, but to fulfill it. You can't fulfill your spiritual program. You can't fulfill this amazing, beautiful life that you see for yourself until you can really embrace that place where the rubber meets the road. And that place, I'm willing to admit, is a very boring place. That's the place where you do food prep for the week. That's the place where you chop a bunch of stuff and put it in the fridge. That's that place. And I've come to love that place because I see it as the place where the tires make contact with the pavement and give us all of our momentum forward. But I'm rambling. I'll shut up for a second. But you see where I'm thinking about this is that's when I think about the 4 freedoms and when I think about what we do for people, I think about it as simply being a moment of extending your personal development program that final inch so that it touches the pavement of your life. And it's really the completion of your lifestyle design. It's the completion of your program design. And if you can't ever come to a place where you truly embrace the minutia, the logistics of your life, you'll never get to see what you're fully capable of.
I think also, I love all that and I agree with that. I think also I've heard from people or I've experienced this myself is like, oh, I'm not ready yet, or it feels uncomfortable, so I must be doing something wrong. So I need to read another book or sign up for another course or go to another coal walking event because there's something wrong with me. This feels hard or I'm not good at this, right? And I often will say to people, oh, you're doing it right. Like, oh, this feels terrible. Like, right on. This is exactly where you're supposed to be. To your analogy earlier of if you're standing on the beach, staring at the island, and you're comfortable and you're warm and you got a Mai Tai in your hand and you're okay. And then you jump in the water, it's like, oh, that's cold, that's salty. I feel weird things in my toes. I don't really know how to swim just yet. I'm not in my groove, right? It's awkward to get into the water. But like, getting in is how you begin.
Oh, totally. Totally. I mean, I think about it, my paradigm is almost comes from a place of, gosh, I think that the way that we think about ourselves is always trailing reality. Meaning, when I first had a child, for the first year, I didn't feel like a father. I was a father. I was terrified and doing everything and feeling incomplete and awkward, and it just, nothing felt right. But I was taking all the actions that a father would take. I was protecting my baby and changing her and feeding her. eventually, here we are about 2.5 years later, and I can honestly say I'm really starting to feel like a dad. 2.5 years after the critical moment. And I think life is so like that, isn't it? That so often we have to take all of the actions to be the kind of person we need to be through fear, through uncertainty, through doubt. And it will come. The feeling of mastery, the feeling of belonging, the feeling of rightness, it'll come. It's not that you're destined to forever feel like it's awkward and terrible. It's just that it'll come so late that it won't freaking matter anymore. Like at the point where I started to feel like a father, I'd already been a father for 2.5 years. But there was a point at which we started developing a community, and I thought, who am I to speak to tens of thousands of people? And I felt like such a fraud. I felt like at any point, the pitchforks were going to come out. People were going to find out. They were all going to march towards me and say, you don't belong here. But I sort of kept moving through it. And now I feel like I am entitled to speak to a large group of people. But what's funny about life is that now I'm writing a book, and I went right back to the beginning of the line. And now I'm at that same zero where I feel like, well, although I feel now after almost 10 years that I'm worthy of being a coach, and I'm worthy of and able to speak to large groups of people. Now I find myself in this new situation writing a book where that voice comes back up and says, well, you're not eligible to be on the book stand next to your heroes. Who are you to think that you can sit next to David Allen and Gary Keller and all these amazing people who have changed your life? And now I know I'm going to have to do the same thing, which is just take the right action through that feeling. And I know there'll be a point in the future when I will feel like I belong as an author, but it'll be so far away that it's really irrelevant to me today. Today, I just have to take the actions. And I've almost gotten to a point where I've just completely divorced my actions from it feeling good, because if I'm taking right action, it won't feel good for usually a couple years. And by that point, it will already be in the bag.
Yeah, man, I get it. As somebody that's writing a book himself, I completely get it. And I picture you standing on that island, right? And then you walk to the other side of the island, and then you see another island in the distance, right? That's a little bit smaller. It's a little bit further away. You're like, oh, damn, I got to get back in this water again. And it's awkward and uncomfortable, and it doesn't make any sense. And I feel like an imposter. It's like, you are an imposter. You've never done this before. You're completely an imposter. So feel like an imposter and fucking do it anyway. That's how you learn.
I one of the most powerful personal development programs out there, arguably the most powerful personal development program, is all of the programs that are built around 12-step methodology, whether it's AA or NA or OA or whatever A. But I think what's so beautiful is there's so many great folksy aphorisms that come out of those programs. And one of it is, you're still thinking like an alcoholic, but you need to take the actions of a person who's not. Right. What I love about that is so often in personal development, we get wrapped up in this idea of you are a golden god. Your instincts are perfectly aligned. Just listen to your heart, baby. It will guide you exactly to the place you want to go. And I don't know about your gut, but my gut tells me to stop working, watch Netflix, and eat ice cream all day long. It doesn't tell me the best things about what I should be doing. And so often I'm actually not listening to what my internal voices are saying, and I'm taking the right action. And so that idea of just taking right action and saying, what would a good father do? I don't feel like a good father right now. I don't feel like worthy. I don't feel capable, but I can ask myself, what do I think a good father would do? And I can do that thing. And if I do that thing long enough, eventually my feeling of myself will catch up to that right action. So I always think about action as coming so far before feeling. And I think the reason I'm fixated on this is because I think we stumbled on something important here, is that I feel like people feel like they're waiting for the feeling. They're waiting for that feeling, like, I'm just waiting for that wave. I have never surfed before in my life, and I've never paddled, and I've never tried to get in the water. But boy, when I see that right wave, I'll get out there and surf like Kelly Slater. And the truth is we need to get out there and take that action of, paddling out and gulping down some salt water and, and getting, I don't know if anybody's actually surfed, but the first time you surf, your chest just gets completely chafed and it feels terrible. And the salt water gets in it and it's stinging. And that first surf session, you can come back. Maybe you've gotten up once barely, and that's exhilarating. But there's this idea of just taking the right action, allowing yourself to feel clumsy and allowing yourself to feel a little bit bad, knowing that the mastery and the feeling is going to come later. But so often in our society, don't we mix it up? We're like, no, I've got to feel right first. No, you don't. Whoever said that? That doesn't gel with my experience at all.
Mine either. Yeah. And I've talked to a client before about this exact idea. And the way that I phrased it was, if you make a list of all of your actions and you compare that list to, for your example, a good dad, like what was a good dad do? He would change diapers, he would show up, he would babysit, whatever. And your action list is completely aligned with that. But internally, you feel like a bad dad or an imposter or whatever. Like there is no difference. Like based upon your results and your activities, like you are a good dad. You just haven't fully actually realized that in your bones just yet.
Yeah.
Is that a fair summary?
So true, man. I mean, I'll just add one more thing to feeling like a bad dad is that I don't want to do it. A lot of the first couple of years of my child's life, I was doing the right thing, but I didn't want to. And I was eating myself alive because I was like, I'm playing with my daughter right now, but I don't want to be playing with my daughter. Right. I was still, in my mind, I was still a single or at least a childless guy who could own his time. And, so I really ate myself alive thinking, oh gosh, I'm doing all the right actions, but I should want to do the right actions. And finally let it go. And I just said, no, right now it's going to have to be good enough that I'm just doing the right actions. Mm-hmm. It'll come. And it did come.
Was there resentment for your loss of freedom or?
Totally.
Is that
Totally. I'm a freedom guy. I mean, I just talked about the 4 freedoms, I'm like all about freedom,
I don't want to change a diaper.
No. So many things. I didn't want to change my identity. I wanted to have a child and be the same essential person. I didn't want to change my identity. And as much as people told me, but your identity as a dad is going to be so much more fulfilling. I didn't believe it. I was like, I'm pretty happy with my life right now. I don't think I really want anything but what I've got right now. And it was, again, this isn't about parenting, but yeah, it was resentment 100%. There were a lot of things I didn't want to give up. But again, I was talking to my wife the other day and we were just marveling that we've designed such a life of freedom around ourselves. We've taken our financial freedom to a point where we've actually hit our financial freedom number, meaning at any point, if I really get sick of it and I don't want to work anymore, I can just close down shop and we're ready to retire. I mean, I can retire at any point. Think about what that does to me and all of my decisions around parenting, around relationship. It allows me to put anything into pole position that I want to, because I can say no to a client. I can say no to a deal. I can say no to offering a service or anything. It just gives me a place that I can be in that power place in my life because I've got so much freedom built up around me. And what that meant is that when I did have troubles with my wife communicating after our first child or feeling like a dad, I had the freedom and I had the space around me to put some coaching in there, put some development in there, and even just put some extra time and rebalance my time towards those things. I think a lot about people who have no freedom, no energy, no time, no financial freedom. And what they're trying to do is deal with the same thing that I dealt with so much less resources. And I'm just a big advocate of like, let's get you more resourced. Let's get you more time. Let's get you more power. Let's get you more financial freedom. Let's get you more career freedom so that when life hits you, and it does, and when you feel unworthy or when you're having communication problems with your spouse, you've got more capacity to deal with it. I mean, I'm probably speaking to the choir here, but when I look out in the world right now, a lot of people will look out there and say, oh, well, that's fine. Yeah, people are working, 8 hours a day, coming home, putting in another shift at the end of the day, working a little bit on weekends. Yeah, that's normal. I think about that as just a horror show. Like that to me is an absolute horror show. I look at the world right now and how people work as knowledge workers. And I just think those people are going to die and really regret how they live their life. And so I do bring a nearly religious zeal to my productivity work because I'm not here to make them more money and I'm not here to make them more productive for their boss. I'm here so that they can reclaim the most important bits of their life before it passes them by.
One thing we haven't touched upon that just came up in my brain was this idea of trade-offs. It sounds like there's a lot of synergy between, or sacrifice perhaps is another way to describe this. And when you talked earlier about living a minimal life or giving up some amount of financial security so that you have more freedom, how do you think about trade-offs or sacrifice or any of those types of things?
Yeah. I mean, the number one thing that I preach is this concept called winning the week, or we talk about planning your week. And I really, step one for every single person, I don't care if you're the CEO of Facebook, it doesn't matter. Mark Zuckerberg comes to me tomorrow, I would start with planning your week. Because planning your week is so much more than people think it is. We're emotional creatures who can act rationally every once in a while. And so much like there's this millennia and millennia before science where we couldn't really progress rapidly. We were really stuck in this single state of this semi-agrarian, culture. And then the scientific method came into our life, and we just saw this exponential progression in human society to the point where we regularly interact with things that are frankly magical. So we've basically made magic real through this simple thing called the scientific method. And if you think about it independent of science, what it really is a tool that helps us see reality as it actually is, not as how we think it was. So instead of walking through life having emotional reactions, we actually have this tool that exists outside of us that can help us see the world as it really is, not through the lens of fear or bias, because we are fear and bias-based creatures. Now think about that in your life. When you approach your week, when you plan your week, often what people are doing is they're making plans, they're setting priorities, they're making decisions based on fear and bias. When I say bias, I don't mean racial bias. Let's just be clear, because that word carries a lot with it. Here's a bias that's well documented. There's one called the planning fallacy. The planning fallacy we've all experienced, which is where we underestimate how long something's going to take and overestimate how much we can do in a given amount of time, right? And we all suffer from that. It's clinically proven, right? The mere urgency effect is another bias where we tend to prioritize seemingly urgent tasks that have lower payoffs over seemingly non-urgent tasks that have really high payoffs. If we were rational actors, we wouldn't do that. And yet we're not rational actors, we're emotional actors. So the fun, you talked about trade-offs, and I'm circling back to that right now. So often we're not really operating in an eyes wide open sort of methodology with our life. We're actually trying to sort of stuff things into the recesses of our consciousness because we're not really ready or emotionally capable of dealing with them right now. And that's what I call eyes wide shut, right? We're progressing through our life. And I'll just give you a simple example. I'm sure somebody listening to this right now can think of something that they've had to do for 6 months, has been a pot boiling over. I mean, something they've really been having to do for 6 months and have managed to occupy their days up to 8 or 9 hours a day without doing that number one thing that they were supposed to be doing. That is eyes wide shut, meaning we are working, we are killing ourselves, but we're often not doing the most important thing, or we're not willing to face a trade-off that would really make all the difference in our life. And so, when you said, are trade-offs important? I would say trade-offs are everything. If you're not able to bring a sense of ownership, and I say this word meaning every single bit of it, courage. I think it really takes courage to face your life. And remember I talked about the conqueror's curse, you've got to defend this territory. I often think about my clients as, being in a castle surrounded by, the horde, the Mongol hordes outside, camped outside. It can really take courage just to walk up to the turret and look at it, just to look at it, to see what's surrounding you can take so much courage. And so, people say, Demir, you make it sound as if it's easy. If I did, I'm sorry. It isn't. It isn't. It takes a lot of courage for you to be able to look at what you're really facing and understand the trade-offs and know that when you go out to do battle, you're going to take losses, right? And the question isn't whether you're going to take losses or not. It's whether you're making those the right losses. So often the work that I'm doing with people when I'm talking about planning their week is we're making Sophie's choices here, right? We're making choices. I always say if you're not setting priorities and cutting things from your week that put a tear in your eye, you're not cutting deep enough. when we make those trade-offs, when we make those choices, there should be a feeling of, wow, I can't do this week, or this won't get done at all, or I have to say no to this volunteer opportunity that I'd wanted to say yes. It's okay if there's a tear running out of your eye, because that's you really looking at your life, facing the choices, the tough choices in your life with eyes wide open. So I'm glad that you talked about trade-offs, because that's the whole game right there.
Yeah. And it's so what people don't want to hear is like, yeah, it's going to require some courage and it's going to feel pretty uncomfortable for a while, for an indefinite while. Like you don't know how it's going to go. So there's a loss of certainty. There's a bravery required, personal responsibility, integrity, all of these words that we love reading about and listening about. And then when it comes time, as you say, on Monday morning to operationalize them or to action them, it's like, that's where I think the rubber meets the road. And it seems like that's where you're focusing a lot of your work and career on.
But I mean, I have great news for people. This is a mile wide and paper thin. It really is. It's a mile wide. I've never had a person that I worked with who actually did what I told them to do and not come back within 2 weeks and say, "Oh God, was that what I was avoiding for six months or 6 years? Right? Was it really that thin? Was I really running away from the monster in the closet only to open up the closet and realize there's no monster in the closet? I mean, was that really it?" So often we can get into this place where we're running away from something. We don't even know what we're running away from. And we simply turn around and face it and go, really? Was that it? Was that all that I was so terrified about? Or we make a tough choice and we get on the other side of it and say, God, I thought that would be the hardest choice in the world. But now that I've made it, I feel actually relieved. So there's so much good news when it comes to productivity. One is that often it's the things that you think, the boogeymen that you're running away from are just that, just made up boogeymen in the closet. And the best thing you could do is get out of bed, walk across the room, throw the closet door open and shine the light up. And the second you do, you'll say, I can't believe I just stayed up for 6 hours worrying about that boogeyman in the closet, because there was nothing there. All I had to do was get up, throw open the door, shine the light on it to realize that it was a big bag of nothing, right? And when I say nothing, I don't mean that there's nothing in your backlog of work to do, whether there's nothing in your responsibilities. I mean, that sort of boogeyman fear that makes us not want to face it, that makes us think, oh, I'm better off this week playing defense more and not getting onto offense. And that's really what I'm talking about. And the other great news with productivity, and I'm just Mr. Good News right now. The good news with productivity is, unlike learning guitar, where you really do have to be bad for a couple of years, this is something that really doesn't take long to get good at. It would really elevate my sense of importance to say that this is Nobel Prize winning science. But the truth is it isn't. It really isn't. These are some really basic things that just take a little ounce of courage to implement. And when you do, and this is what I've gotten addicted to, is that feeling of people's eyes lighting up when they're like, oh, I've got the enemy on the run, right? I've got my email inbox at 0 and I've created some systems to get work off my plate, and I'm planning my week every week. So I'm not stepping on landmines all the time. Like, I'm actually on offense now. And this is crazy because, I'm in the other side of the field and I'm shooting on the opponent's goal. And man, there's nothing better than that, because even if they still have to take a little while to create more freedom in their life, even if there's a couple of years for them to start up their business, even if they have to work through a backlog of maybe crap that's built up, you can get from defense to offense in a couple of weeks. And that's the critical point. That's the critical move. Because when you're on offense, you feel like, man, I've got them on the run. Like I'm the one who's running this show.
I pictured the Wizard of Oz when you were talking a moment ago, of how we have this story of this grand enemy or this thing that we have to confront. Then you go around the corner, it's like, oh, you're just like a little old man pulling some levers. Like the reality of the situation isn't aligned with our story or our beliefs of what it actually is, right? And
yeah.
So for someone listening that is thinking about, okay, pragmatically or easily, how can I begin to actually plan my week? Is there a tip or two that you could say, like, start here, try that, so they can walk away from this with, something to do?
And I'll say this honestly, I think a lot of people have bad experiences planning their week because it is such a counterintuitive exercise. Meaning, it really goes against the grain of almost all of our, what we would want to emotionally do, right? So one of the first steps that I put people through is learning a lesson from the past week. It's one of the first things I do with every single one of my clients. Every Friday in my community, we pre-plan our week together. It's often 200 people on a Zoom call. We're pre-planning our week together. And the first thing we do is we learn a lesson from the past week. What happened last week that we could have done better, that can inform our week? And I can tell you the distaste is almost immediate for new people. Like, oh, I don't want to relive last week. That was a disaster. I don't want to go back there emotionally. I want to put it in a sarcophagus, seal it up as tight as I possibly can, drop it to the bottom of the ocean. I do not want to go do a postmortem on my last week. That's a good example of how what you should do is directly opposed to what you feel like doing. So it's no wonder that people have bad experiences with planning their week, because they're doing it in what I call an intuitive weekly planning. Like, oh, just open my calendar, look at a couple things, la-di-da, la-di-da. And that's really not planning. So what I think we've created, and I'll confess, with the help of tens of thousands of our clients, so this isn't something we made up in a dark room. This is something that we've actually discovered working this process with lots of people from lots of different industries, is that, we've created a process that's almost condensed all of the right steps into less than 30 minutes. So quick disclaimer, we won't be able to get into all of that right now. And if you want to check it out, we teach it for free at winningtheweek.com. So go to winningtheweek.com. We got a free masterclass where we teach it. That's like, I'm Johnny Appleseed of planning your week. I want to create a generational change in this one simple behavior. So yeah, check that out, winningtheweek.com. But one of the key things that I think most people lack in their planning is calendarizing. So really rapidly, learn a lesson every single week. Set a leverage priority, meaning don't just do what feels important, do what makes your life easier. Scan your week for landmines, meaning don't just open your calendar and then shut it and run away like the police are after you. You really got to interrogate your calendar like it's a John Grisham movie. In a John Grisham movie, the key witness doesn't want to tell you the truth. You've got to interrogate them. You've got to trick them into telling you the truth. And your calendar is not really going to tell you the truth. You have to interrogate your calendar. So that's step number 3. Step number 4 is triaging your task list and really thinking about it like Napoleonic War, where they had too many soldiers coming in dead and dying. You've got to triage. You've got to say, not all these soldiers are going to live, and that's terrible. And I wish I could help all these soldiers. But just like those soldiers coming off a battle, you have an obligation to look at all your tasks and say, not all these tasks are going to get done, right? So my job isn't getting all the tasks done. My job is figuring out where I can do the most good. Where can my effort do the most good? But here's the step I really want to focus on, because this is the step that everybody's missing. Once you've done all those things, you need to calendarize your to-do list. Calendarizing your to-do list means you got to take everything you think you're going to do this week and give it a time in your calendar when it's actually going to get done. And a lot of people will probably be hearing this and go, oh, just a visceral feeling of panic and doubt and resistance. Just the idea, and I get so many people at the step saying, Demir, come on, that's too much. Really? I need to take every single thing I'm going to do this week and I need to put it on my calendar. And I always say, what if it was just enough? What if what you think is too far is the starting line? What if you think is going too far with your productivity is actually just the starting line? What if all of your efforts to date have just been a couple notches below the right amount of effort to really get the result that you need? It only I could teach you how to do it in less than 30 minutes. So we're not talking about something that's time intensive. It's really choice. The reason I think calendarizing is so important is what you're really doing is you're actualizing your time demands to your time supply. You're saying, I've only got 168 hours this week. And if I'm going to be the father I want to be, if I'm going to be the husband I want to be, if I'm going to be the citizen I want to be, and the worker that I need to be, it's not going to happen by accident. I'm not going to be this amazing human being in all these 20 different dimensions of being a human being by accident. It's going to take design. So for those of you out there that have a physical revulsion to planning, I know that's who I used to be. I had a nearly religious conversion. And what I'm here to tell you, I feel like I'm put on planet Earth by God to tell you this, is that when you look at a full calendar, I want you to stop thinking, oh, I don't have any freedom. That's gross. Oh, that's no way to live. I want you to think about a full calendar as a Mona Lisa, the perfect picture of who you get to be this week to satisfy all of the most important dimensions of your life.
Glad you addressed that, because I was thinking about the person listening to that thinking, but you told me time freedom, and now you're telling me to fill up all of my time with all of these things I need to do. So where's the being in that? And perhaps not realizing that the discipline is the freedom, right? That if you do it this way, you'll have a lot more time over here to actually be present and live your life and do all those.
Well, I'll say two things to that person, because I think that's an important, because my core value is freedom, I think, as you can see. Anybody who's listened to this can see that my core value is freedom. And so the reason I was never willing to truly plan my week, my month, anything, was because I felt like when I put something on the calendar, it restricted my freedom. And I'll say two things to that past version of myself. Number one is, just because you put it on the calendar doesn't mean it's going to happen exactly like that. You know, I like the word navigating from sailing. A navigation is not the same, right? When a sailor sets course, from the very moment they pull away from shore, it is not going to plan. They're not getting exactly the winds they thought they were going to get. They're not getting the tides they exactly planned for. There could be pirates, there could be things that hit the ship, and there's so much that can happen. So what do? They trim the sails. They adapt. They move around storms, right? And so you have that same flexibility. When you put 168 hours into your calendar, you're not saying it's going to happen exactly like this. What you're saying when you put that in the calendar, you're saying, this is my navigation plan. I know it's not going to happen exactly like this. If I wake up on Tuesday and I'm sick, I'm not beholden to do the thing that I said. What I am beholden to do is, instead of undermining the plan, is to make changes to the plan that fulfill it. Because so often when we change the plan, we're sabotaging the plan. So I tell my clients, change the plan like a maniac. Go crazy. Change the plan all you want. I want to know that you're changing the plan in a way that you're fulfilling it, in a way where you're still arriving at the same place, at the same final destination. Number two.
Or you do number two.
Oh, yeah.
And remember it is one, I just wanted to check in, is an example of that, because I do this personally and I'm being selfish right now. If I'm like looking at this thing I have to do at 3 p.m. and I'm like, I don't really love it, but tomorrow at 1 p.m. I need to do this other thing, and I just swap them out. Is that like an example of navigating?
That's what I call trading. You're just trading.
Yeah. Okay.
Trade, and feel free to trade. I tell my clients, trade inside the week, because when you trade for next month, it's the same as saying you're never going to do it at all. So make trades and just make it inside the same business week, right? Okay. So absolutely. Here's another tip. Put some UUW in, right? UUW is just flex time. So many people will stack up their dominoes so tight that if one thing goes wrong, it creates a shitstorm for the rest of their week, right? In fact, if you've ever seen those people on Instagram that do domino falls that are like an entire gymnasium, what they do is every 2 meters, they'll take out 4 dominoes. They'll create a little gap so that if somebody accidentally kicks over one of the dominoes, it doesn't knock down the whole thing and they don't have to start over. I think about flex gaps in your schedule as being those little gaps that, yes, it's unused time, but it's gaps that you're putting into your schedule to make the schedule more realistic, to make the schedule more fluid, and to make it so that when you do have unwanted, unplanned work, which is the acronym UUW, which we all do, then you've got gaps where you can plan for it. And so a good place to start is to put 5 hours in your week. Just 5 hours. Put 5 hours and spread it around however you like. But just try next week to put in 5 hours of UUW time, of flex time, and see what that does to your week. Because what's going to happen then is you're going to realize that makes your plan so much more achievable. Because when you do invariably get hit by that project from your boss, or your kid goes to the hospital, or whatever happens next week, that's going to happen, you just don't know it yet. You've got 5 hours of that flex time built in to compensate for it. Okay, now the other thing I was going to say, and this blew my mind. I don't know why it blew my mind, because it's so obvious, is that now when I'm designing my week, I will actually design in 2 hours a week to sit on my couch with my over-the-ear headphones and listen to albums. This is a new thing. I really never, I did it in high school. It was one of my happiest moments in high school, was just listening to The Doors with over-the-ear headphones, right? Mm-hmm. And I just let it go as an adult. I don't know why. I just thought, oh, well, that's not something I get to do anymore. So just because it's in your calendar doesn't mean it has to be work. There's actually a block in my calendar that says listening to music. And it's a time when I've scheduled when I can actually sit back and listen to music. And what's great is, as an adult who's got responsibilities, not only have I scheduled that time, but I've made sure that my wife is supported, that my child doesn't need me in that hour. So when I plan free time to do something as carefree as listening to music, it's something that I genuinely know that I'm able to do. Because all too often what we do is we deny ourselves true personal care time, fun time, and then we start stealing it. We steal it because we need it so badly. But when we steal it at the expense of our wife. We steal it at the expense of our employer. We steal it at the expense of our kids. And we feel bad about it the whole time. We feel like a guilty, person with their hand in the cookie jar. We're like, oh no, I'm stealing something from somebody else. And when you plan it, you can have it without any feelings of guilt, like you're shortchanging anybody else.
Yeah, picture that movie where the dude's like hiding in the bathroom with his phone, or I can't remember that movie. Like,
yeah,
was it Ben Stiller or somebody? Was like, she's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Pooping." He's like, "Oh, it's Paul Rudd." Anyway, so
yeah, I remember that.
There's like no time, so he has to go and like find 5 minutes to go and sit in the bathroom to just have his space. So you're talking about scheduled play, scheduled free time, listen to music, go for a walk, paint, have sex, whatever.
And so many people, if you're listening to this and you're playing defense so badly that the idea of listening to an album feels like living on the surface of Mars, just know that you can start where you feel comfortable. I had somebody who's it was a husband-wife combo, and I told the husband, hey, take the kids out to the zoo and give your wife some personal time. And she could not conceive of the idea of getting massage or anything really indulgent. And so I said, what do you want to do at that time? She said, I just want to clean the house. I just want the kids to be out of the house. I just want time to myself to turn on some music and clean the house. And if that's what feels doable for you right now, if that's all you feel like you can claim for yourself right now, fucking go claim it. Go claim that. Take some time, have the husband go take the kids out to the park, take the kids out to the zoo just for 30 minutes or an hour, whatever you can get away with. And take it for what you think you can have, because that'll build your confidence to the point where you say, well, that wasn't a disaster. That felt great. I wonder what else I could do.
Yeah, I've talked to my sister before. She's got two young ones. And I feel like she's told me, I just want to wash my hair. Like,
yeah,
I just want to take a shower. You could probably relate. Just want to take a shower without worrying about what my daughter is getting up to right now. Right. So it can be as simple as that.
Yeah.
Demir, you're fucking great, man. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I love your vibe.
Thank you.
Really resonate with what you're putting down. Where can people find you? You said winningtheweek.com is a good starting point, but are there other spots? Are you on Instagram? Is there another website?
Yeah, I'll just direct people to Winning the Week, because again, I'm the Johnny Appleseed of planning your week. I just want to get out there with that message. You can get your life back. And it's as simple as planning your week 30 minutes. Everybody has 30 minutes to plan their week, and it's going to result in hours of time back and so much more energy. I mean, it really is the smallest thing you can do to really create a chain reaction of getting back in control of your life. Again, it's 100% free. There's no tricks. Go to winningtheweek.com. We've got a training that shows you how to plan your week in less than 30 minutes. Just that is the smallest thing. If there's one thing I could just leave everybody with, there's a place to start this. And I know there's so many books out there and there's so many thinkers and there's new apps and everything. And I would say there is a first stepping stone that you want to step on, and it is planning your week every single week. So I hope you avail us of that. And I hope even if you don't, that you just listen to this and just decide to bring some courage to your week, right? And go out there and claim some of those 4 freedoms, because I really believe that everybody can. I believe we live in a magical time when you can, if you decide to get into ownership of the circumstances of your life, we have such beautiful resources available to us now that you can really create something so much more beautiful than you ever thought was possible.
Love that, man. I picture you as a lifeguard, like a David Hasselhoff type, and the person's like on the beach and they're like looking at the island, and you're like, you walk them down to the shoreline and you're just like, here, like get in the water here. It's going to be cold. It's going to be salty. And then just swim in that general direction. And then they do it. I feel like that's what you're about, man. And
thank you.
Long may it continue. Thank you so much for being here and all you do.
Thanks, Jeremy.
All right. So that is Demir Bentley. And as he mentioned, you can find him on winningtheweek.com. And I encourage you to take advantage of what he just said. Calendarize your week. Focus on the stuff that you can control. Scan for some landmines, make a to-do list, put it in the calendar, schedule it, get it done. Take charge, take some agency, responsibility, get your shit done, you know? And it starts with going to that website, winningtheweek.com. Check him out, follow him along, follow him wherever he leads you. Like the Pied Piper, Johnny Appleseed, dropping seeds of good stuff for you to plant and grow and water and consume. Anyway, I'm obviously tired, but thank you for being here. Thanks for all your support, for sharing the podcast. If you have suggested guests or ideas, please do let me know. I am all ears, and I appreciate you. I just appreciate you. That's it. Full stop. If you are listening to this right now, I fucking appreciate you. I think you're one of the good ones, and I'm grateful. Anyway, I'm rambling. I love you. Do some cartwheels. Go live your life. Have some fun.